So, welcome to another week of conversations with Teresa and Meredith. Um, I would like this week to talk about the art of curiosity and how important that is in a therapeutic setting with your client. When we're kind of thinking about curiosity, quite often, a lot of times people will come in for a hypnotherapy session and they will say, "Oh, I want to overcome my fear of flying." You go, okay. Now, not everyone's fear of flying is going to be the same. Sometimes it's the anticipation, but once they get on board, they're okay. Sometimes it's only when there's turbulence, or sometimes it's when they get closed in the plane and they don't feel very good when the doors close. It could be a number of different things that that person is personally experiencing when they say, I have a fear of flying. So what do you think is important, Teresa, in the way of the kind of questions we might want to start to ask a client that's going to unpack so we can understand what's really going on for them?
I think we need to not preload those questions as already anticipating the answer, because quite often we already, like you've just addressed, we've already got an idea ourselves of what the reason might be for them not having a liking for flying. So they're going to be questions that are like, have you always been like this? When did it first start? So you're asking them to give you the answers and explore within rather than you giving the answers for them.
Mm. So these typical questions are when, what, how, why, whom, according to what, according to whom, is that true for you? These questions are open-ended questions predominantly. So what's the difference between an open-ended question and a closed question? So an open-ended question would be allowing the person to explore their version of reality and share that with you in a much more broad sense. Whereas if you're asking a closed question, it's a yes/no question. And that can be quite loaded, and it can also cause a therapist to miss an opportunity of proper exploration. So what do you think about the importance of exploration in a therapeutic setting? What are some of the things off the top of your head would be an advantage between you and that client?
It's given it a more humanistic approach and a one-on-one personal approach to your session rather than using the same session for everybody that comes in with a fear for flying, for example. So it's tailored to your client's needs. I would say would be one of our main ones, that because quite often with therapists, sometimes you find something that works, and for whatever reason you might go down that rabbit hole that for everybody that comes in with that challenge, you're going to use those same things each time and ask the same questions, but that just might not be right for a particular client you're
Mm,
working with.
absolutely. The other thing is rapport. So let's look at what rapport actually means. So when we're kind of looking at trust in a session, this is what we are talking about when we're creating rapport with a client. It's creating a level of trust so the client can feel comfortable to explore that topic in more detail if that's a necessary part, right? So what
Mhm.
happens if we fall out of rapport? How might we notice that we've perhaps taken a wrong turn somewhere and it's not quite making sense?
You'd start looking at your client's body language,
Mhm.
um, and also look at their facial expressions. That can tell you an awful lot of how they're actually feeling and whether they're feeling comfortable with you,
Mm,
the way that they're sitting as well.
mm. So a very, very quick change in demeanor might sort of suggest that you've hit a chord that isn't necessarily um, the client agreeing with your approach. So that they're going to become a little bit miffed or upset or maybe angry, but a lot of people will try and hide it. So they'll just kind of give you short answers, they'll shut it down, they won't feel comfortable, and they might even challenge you back if they have a level of confidence to do so. So they might say, hey, I don't really want to waste my time going into that right now. I'd rather focus on this. Now, if we have gone out of rapport, there are some ways to save that session. And one of the ways is to maybe backtrack a bit and just summarize what you've covered so far. And also come back to the client. So what do you think you need next? It's going to help you to make a real breakthrough today. So the client has the answer. And often if we reconnect with the client's intelligence and we invite the client to come play again and offer something to the session that makes sense to them rather than you going into problem solving as if you know all about them, or you're kind of leading them into a direction that you think they need to go. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Teresa?
Yes, I think especially on your early stages of when you're starting out a practice, it can be very easily to think that you're the fix-it person and have the answers to your client session, rather than getting your client to open up and do the leading, because as you said, they have the answer within. You might not feel it as the client at that moment in time that you have those answers, but they are there. They're sitting there waiting to be revealed, I guess, coaxed back out.
One of the things that I actually like to ask, and it's a very broad thing, say, okay, we've covered quite a bit today. Is there anything else that you haven't already told me that you think would be important for me to understand about your current situation? So what do you think that creates, Teresa, when I might ask a question like that for a client?
That would create trust and a feeling again of rapport, because it feels like they're actually being listened to. You're wanting to know how they're feeling. Is there anything else they would actually like to go into in this session? Not that you're running the session. It feels as if they're actually involved and not just a number.
Because quite often we can have a blind spot in our therapy session, and the client may not have had the courage to bring up something really important that you might need to know yet. So that kind of inquiry question helps the client search and come up with relevant information, or to at least say, no, we've covered pretty much it. Yeah, I think you've got the full picture. The reason why we don't want to miss something, what might happen if we did?
It could be something that they feel is actually quite insignificant, an event or something that's actually to them, but that could actually connect and correlate with other events that has actually caused that phobia or fear. And they're just hiding it because, although, like you said, we don't want the client to feel uncomfortable, it is important, I feel, that we do the unpacking and gently nudge for people to reveal what's going on, so we get to that root cause, not just sitting there on the surface.
Yeah. A lot of times the root cause is missed because you haven't maybe had enough time to really get the client feeling comfortable enough to be able to share that vulnerable moment, because to them it's perhaps quite a deep trauma that they're a bit scared to go into. And so if we can, as practitioners, create a safe place where they can feel like you can be trusted with that information, that can take a little bit of time. And there are a few practitioners out there who go, okay, well, we can do that, all of that under hypnosis. Now, 31 years tells me that that is not fully the truth, because there are going to be certain types of people who won't feel comfortable unless they've told you a certain amount about themselves and the situation to then be hypnotized. So if someone comes in and you've only just briefly understood a sketch of what's going on, and then you take them into hypnosis and you do a process where it's very private, and you invite the subconscious to go back to the root cause, and they start nodding their head when they're there and so on, Well, good luck if they're actually doing that, because sometimes people are embarrassed and that client is just nodding their head because they want to appease you and get it over and done with and get out of there, and you'll never see them again. But they won't tell you that that's what they're feeling. So quite often it is important to have proper rapport, proper connection and trust, where the client feels you know enough to be able to sensitively journey them safely through a process. What is your sort of thoughts on that, Teresa?
Yeah, again, I think it's being really personalizing your actual sessions, making your client feel welcome, feel comfortable, that it is a non-judgmental environment, that they can relax and open up. So don't just jump in quickly into your session and think like, okay, we're going to do this really great big long relaxation induction, because that may be fine, but it might be more important in this instance to actually take time, talk to your client, get to know your client, get them to relax and build rapport before you even start going into your hypnosis inductions, and doing that unpacking, getting them to repeat back maybe what you've actually asked them, the questions, so that they feel as if they're involved, so you're not just bombarding them constantly with questions when you're doing your unpacking.
Yeah, 100%. Often too, clients have an idea that you're going to just hypnotize them and they'll wake up and they're all fixed. But there needs to be a level of collaboration to a degree, and they need to turn up and be invested and buy into the concepts that you're journeying through. And without that rapport to begin with, that can often be missing in a therapeutic relationship. The other part is, a lot of times when we think about unpacking, we don't need to know to the nth degree every little juicy detail. That's not as important as understanding significant moments in that client's life, but they don't have to relive the moment by telling you all the nitty-gritty of that moment unless they want to. But that's not what we're talking about when we're thinking about unpacking. So when we're looking at, when did this first occur for you? Can you remember when there was a time where it wasn't like that? So tell me a little bit about that. What was it like when you didn't have that experience, that feeling when you went on, let's say for flying, went and boarded a plane? What was it like when that fear wasn't around? So you get to unpack that. So why do you think things changed for you? Now they're going to tell you. If they have a hunch, they're going to tell you. Easiest way to get to that root cause. Now, some of them might say, I have no idea. You go, okay. They probably do on another level, but maybe consciously they haven't joined the dots yet. So that's okay too. You can work with that. But even if, let's say, we never find the root cause, we can definitely help a client move into the future in a better way. So it's I think, false thinking that we always have to find the root cause. I think there's a part of them on a deep level that kind of gets the deep understanding of where it all began because it's playing the program. But on a conscious level, they may never need to know that. So that's where sometimes when we do hypnosis, it might be on the deepest level of change that the subconscious does whatever it needs to switch that off or to change that in some way that makes sense for the client. And the root cause might come as a metaphor, or could sort of come in another type of representation that then you work with that. So if you go back to the first time you felt feeling scared, tell me what if scared had a color, what color would it be? And if it were a shape, what shape would it form? And if we think about the size of that fear, is it big or small? Is it light or heavy? What does it feel like if you could touch it? Is it hot or cold? What's the surface like? Is it the same if you were to walk all the way around it? Does it have a sound attached, or is it silent? And if it had a name, what name would you give it? And how old is it? Now, all of these things are quite interesting, because then when you allow that fear to become a thing, let's say even if you have the inability to find the root cause, you're still working with the fear that you don't want anymore. So we can start to play around and manipulate that. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Teresa?
I love the example you just given, because like you're saying, they may not be ready to actually address it, or may not know how to actually address that fear. And they might not feel secure enough to open up and state that, although they know it but don't want to reveal it. So when you actually ask them to give it a color and a shape and a size and smell, etc., you're sort of disassociating to an extent away from it for the client. Although being associated, you're giving it a different form, so they're more likely to reveal and open up of what's actually going on.
You can also give the fear a voice, right? So if someone's finding it really tricky to find the voice in their own conscious, critical place of their memories, you can absolutely invite under hypnosis for the fear to have a voice and to share with the client why it's there, what service it's providing. Because that part of that client thinks it's doing a fantastic job protecting them, probably. But it's nice for the client to give a moment for that fear to have a voice, so there can be a level of understanding. And this is where curiosity, I think, as a therapist is key here. We want to always be curious about what's really going on. You know, what does that client need? What would come next if they had it?
I
And when
think
you start, yeah, sorry, you
I was
go.
going to say, I think that's where wonderfully, where you're using your submodalities to bring in your shapes and your colors, parts then can flow in lovely into your actual session, because then you can ask them, is there a part that's wanting you to do this? And you can strike up that conversation with them and start, like you say, being curious and getting them to be curious as to why this happens on a different level. Yeah.
Now, some of them, people out there might wonder what you meant by submodalities. So we might just do a little wee quick intro into what that even means, because that's quite a word if you haven't come across it before. So in short, I'll just quickly summarize that, shall I? We've got 5 senses, basically. We see the world, we hear the world, we touch the world, we smell it, we taste it, and so on. It's called the VACOG system: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. So there are 5 basic senses. And those senses have a language involved, so that how we actually describe what that sounds like, what that looks like, what that feels like. These are called submodalities. So we're looking at the language that that person uses to describe that sensation. Yeah. And that can be really powerful, because when you have a person that is describing fear and how that feels for them, and let's say if it was a color, it might be red, or if it was to be weighed, it might be heavy. In hypnosis, we can say, well, would you like to change the red? You know, what would you like to do with the color? How would you like it to be? Would you like to make it light? If you could make it light, what would that be like? And we can play around with these submodalities, the way that someone describes something. And when we start to do that, we start to influence the feeling that we initially had. We start to soften it off. And that can be extremely powerful, because everything is a construct. So that memory of that fear, or that memory of that moment, is a memory construct, and that memory construct has submodalities attached to it. So it's you remembering how it looks, how it sounds, how it feels, how it tastes, how it smells, So these are very interesting things that hypnotherapists can work with when they're working with a particular issue with a client. Would you like to add anything to that?
I would. I'd just like to say, like, when people might be thinking of memory to it, what do you mean by like that? So, like, an example would be is if you're walking down the street and you can smell freshly baked bread, your memory then goes to a time in your mind when you actually, if you love it, you think of a thought that brings you back, that smell brings you back to a time where you were perhaps eating or walked into a bakery and you had that smell of the fresh baked bread. Or it could have a negative emotion that's attached to it and you see a negative picture to it.
Absolutely. So we anchor memories through emotion. And so the emotion is often elicited through our senses. So if we have a strong emotion attached to it, chances are we've got a story of experience attached to that have smells attached, or a vision attached to it, or a sound attached to it. So let's say someone goes through a robbery and there was gun being shot. Now they might be at home and someone's car backfires and instantly they go into terror, because what that sound reminds them of is potentially the gunshot. So even though they're not in that place anymore, their brain will register it as if it's the same, and it will start to create a reaction that's very strong. Now, if someone's been able to process the robbery, then as a hypnotherapist, we can help change the association of that particular sound trigger to something much calmer, much more lighter or brighter, let's say. So every time they hear a sound like that, it can mean more of a neutral thing rather than automatically taking them straight back to that trauma moment.
It's amazing, our mind, of how quickly we can attach and change the negative behaviors, yet for hypnosis we can flip that back into positive behaviors. So if the mind can do the negative, it can definitely do the positive, but hypnotherapy seems to be one of those last things that people relate to actually being able to do that sort of thing. If I'm coming across, not choosing my words right there, but if I had the way I'm trying to explain it, of the negative impact, and we can flip that to the positive. A lot
good
easier.
Example would be someone daydreaming about the future, and sometimes they're in channel negative. So they're fearing something that hasn't even happened yet, and they're actually in hypnosis, but they're in the negative channel of hypnosis. So they're compounding a negative idea, and it feels really, really strong. And every time they go there and they think about it in that same way, they're making that fear bigger and bigger and bigger. And so when we're thinking about what a hypnotherapist can do, is to support that client into imagining that future moment in a much nicer way. So we're thinking about the doing script, how do you want to be? Now, the only person that can answer that is the client. You cannot not assume upon the client how they want that new experience to be. And that's where, coming back to the theme of today's talk, curiosity, that's coming back to the client and really asking them really clever questions that helps them to play with understanding and to find what is the opposite to that old way of doing things. If you could flip that, what would that new version be? So if someone was really, really scared of gunfire, how would you like that to be? I just want it to be neutral. So, okay, what does neutral mean to you? So you start to delve a little bit more into that. Well, just like I was walking across and maybe the gun is part of some farmer, perhaps killing some ducks, and it's just duck season, that's all it is, and I'm not really thinking about anything other than, oh, that's just duck season. Go, okay, right. So they're starting to paint a picture of how they would like to experience that sound if it was a sound of gunfire, but in a much more calmer, more neutral way. Now, the client has the ability to engage their imagination straight away. When you start to explore that, they're already stimulating new neural pathways, new synapses in the brain to create a new path that they could potentially play in the future, a new program. Yeah. So why is hypnosis so important here? Well, people naturally go into hypnosis, and quite often by accident, the very fears or strong emotional experience that they're currently trapped in is their own hypnotic mind compounding that story. And so as a hypnotherapist, how we can support that client is to really get them to understand how magical they truly are and how powerful they are, and that level of anxiety or that level of fear, they've created that all by themselves. Now, if they can create it, they can also undo it. And the art of suggestion and thinking about what would it be like if it was undone? If you never had to ever feel like that ever again, what would that be like? Even just asking a question like that, it's quite magical to the brain. The brain goes into the what if. What if I were to be free of this? What would that be like? And when someone starts to give energy to that new thought, things start to change. So you're interrupting the old, stale, negative story, and you're bringing something new to the table. You're helping the client to look at the possibilities of life ahead without whatever it is that they've been experiencing so far. What are your thoughts on that, Teresa?
Yes, definitely. And that's again where you get the curiosity is sort of like, what would your life look like without that fear? Okay, what possibilities would that open up to you? So you could have a completely different world altogether if you could fly. You could travel all over the world for business or just on vacation. Whereas if you've got that fear attached to you all your time, it sort of puts limits. So there's endless possibilities when you start to get curious and imagine and get them to use their imagination of what would it sound like, look like, feel like, be like, how do you want it to be? Yeah.
Now, what is lovely, when I'm starting to unpack the client, I'm looking for the treasure in the words of description of how they want it to be. And I'll often use that very description back to them when we're doing the formal hypnosis. So if I hear them saying, I want to just be really grounded in my approach, I will use that word, grounded, and I will mirror that back to them in the hypnotic journey. Say, and you find you can imagine now yourself being really grounded in that situation, can't you? And you start to invite the very client's words because they're quite magical. And so when we're looking at that curiosity, it gives you what I call golden nuggets of information that can be then used later in the hypnotic journey to reinforce that client's wish list.
Also building rapport as well with your client, because if you imagine if somebody was very intelligent and using really big long words and all that lot, and you start speaking to them in just little short sentences and that, they're not going to be in rapport with you. They're probably not going to connect. So again, that's really important that you do listen to what your client is saying and use their words back to them.
I think when people start out they may accidentally fall into the trap of using their own description of what the client is saying rather than the client's description of that emotion. So let's imagine you've got 10 people and you interview them, say, explain to me what happiness is for you. What happens when you feel happy? There'll be 10 different descriptions of happy. Same with if you ask them, what's anger like for you? When you get angry, what's that like? There'll be 10 different versions of anger. Now, if, for example, someone says, I want to feel more at peace, and you say, you're going to feel more relaxed then, aren't you? They go, no, I want to feel more at peace, because relaxed and peace is different for that person potentially. But it might be the same for you, but it doesn't mean it's the same for the client. So when we are mismatched, that can also cause a break in rapport or trust, because the client really feels you didn't quite get me. And so, yeah, matching the words the client's words in the session can be extremely useful for them to reinforce their own words back to them, if you like.
And allow them to play with their story in their imagination and just listen and remember, so that you can use that later if you need be, rather than chipping in and joining in with that conversation, because you could take it into a completely different direction to what your client would do.
Yeah. Sometimes too, less is more. So coming back to a client I had earlier today, and one of the two things that they wanted to achieve in the session is to feel more grounded and more confident. I won't get into why they came in, but they wanted to feel more grounded and more confident. So when we got to the hypnosis, after unpacking history and what was going on and what was causing the client to not feel grounded and confident, we were ready for the hypnosis. And in the hypnosis, I gently guided them into imagining an alternate reality where their best self is thriving and their best self is grounded and confident. And they're going through life and everything is clicking into place, and just to kind of journey that, it's see what that is like. And then what would happen, and this is the other question, inquiry question, what would happen if you could take that understanding back into this timeline? What would you like to see change? Now, I have no idea what the client is hallucinating in their mind. Absolutely none. But my core words that I'm using and reinforcing to the client is, and whatever you put in place will allow you to naturally feel more balanced or grounded and confident. So you're using those key emotion words, those emotive words, back to the client, and the client will then make it make sense. They will wrap the details around that story the way that makes sense for them. Yeah.
That's the beauty.
Yeah. Sorry, you
That's
go.
the beauty of curiosity. You know, we don't need to know everything. It's the client that needs to know that story. And I think, especially as you're starting out, is remembering we don't have the answers. The client knows that. We don't need to know everything that the client is seeing or feeling.
Yeah. But I think too, it's that balance between unpacking them enough that they feel that you really understand who's sitting in front of them today, and honoring them as a human being and them in the moment that they're in, where they have a witness to that in a really therapeutic, safe way. And then you can play. Then you can go through that journey, and you can do these sort of deeper experiences with the client and trust that they are going to do those things that you invite them to do when it's time, because they feel heard.
And that's the importance, again, coming back to, and we keep talking about rapport. So you've
Yeah.
got to be curious, and you need to have that rapport.
Awesome. On that note, tune in again. We're doing these pretty much on a weekly basis, these talk times, and we're going to cover many different topics. So if you do have a topic you'd like us to cover, you can always share that in the comments, and or just email through, and we can talk on those things. But look, like and follow us on YouTube. It is about sharing information out into the bigger, broader world. And if you are interested in training to become a clinical hypnotherapist, check out our information on the NZACH website. This is the sort of opportunity, I guess, to quench your thirst of knowledge and really help people in a really meaningful way. And I'm one of your guides, so I love teaching. I love to share what I've been doing for 31 years. So please check out the website. We have some dates coming up. We're also playing with online learning as well, because a lot of people can't always travel to Wellington. So if you are one of those people that would like to do things more online, we're definitely looking at creating that option for people, so it's more accessible. But yeah, look, it's been wonderful having you again to chat with, Teresa. And again, I hope this is inspiring you all to get a little bit curious about what hypnotherapy is and what it could be for you if you decide to go on that path for your career. So anyway, have a lovely day ahead if you're doing that, or none-eyes if people are going to sleep. But it's been wonderful to chat.
Yep. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and take care, and we'll see you next time.
Cool. Bye.
Bye.